Hey, my brothers and sisters in Christ, it's Sharon, and I'm back with you in how I study and understand my Bible. I'm alone in the room. I've prayed, I've emptied myself of all just stuff. I am ready to receive what the Lord is teaching me. So, let's go ahead and be about God's business. I'm coming to you out of John chapter 21, verses 1 through 25. And I start with my observations. And some observations I came across in here is Jesus shows himself. His disciples keeps themselves, busy, fishing, not to be idle. I see the first time Jesus refers to them as children, the obedience lessons that he's teaching them, the forgiveness, how he reaches out to Peter. I see that, and the blessings that come with obedience. And so, forgive me, my glasses are steaming up. Don't know why, but anyway, let's go ahead and get started with verses 1 through 14, where the appearance to the 7 disciples at Galilee. You see, Jesus in Matthew, he tells them to meet them at the Mount of Galilee. And so that's what they did. They're chilling, waiting on Jesus to come. And I guess he didn't show up when they thought he should have shown up. Because, Jesus now, resurrected, he just shows up. And so Peter says, hey, I'm going to go fishing. And the other disciples, they do this as well, And they get on the boat and go out into the middle of the Sea of Galilee and fish all night long. And some of the commentators see this as Peter turning away from Christ. He's going back to doing his old job, which is a fisherman. And it's, and some other ones are saying, well, no, that's not what he's doing. He's just keeping himself busy, which I agree with that, because I don't know if you guys ever heard the old saying of an idle mind is a devil's workshop. So Peter was being busy along with the other disciples, and then they out there fishing all night long and catch nothing. Now Peter is a professional fisherman. He knows how to fish. But anyway, in verse 4, we see Jesus, he's standing on the shore over there. Hey, y'all out there fishing. They couldn't recognize who he was. Could have been that they were too far away from him to actually see with their physical eyes. Fall, it's twilight, the sun rising, and just couldn't quite make him out. And he says, children, do you have any food? And they was like, well, no. And he tells them to, cast your net on the right side of the boat. They do that. And, number one, the word, he calls them children, but that is that's a term that they use in that culture. He wasn't disrespecting grown men, but he's a teacher teaching. And what the lesson he's teaching here is that, admit your failures. Admit your failures and be open to receive correction, instructions. And, that's what Peter did, in this chapter here in this book, John, you see they just do it. They don't question him or go back and forth with him. And I'm this and I'm a professional fisherman. I know what I'm doing. There is nothing out here. They did it. And when they was obedient, here comes the blessing. They caught so many fish that it was just not enough room in their boat to handle it, and they were just struggling to get the fish on the boat here. And then John says, that sounds like Jesus. And that's all he had to say was Jesus. Peter put his clothes on, he put his robe on, and jumped in the water and swam over there to the shore to Jesus. He left all the fish. Now, number one, Peter is a businessman. He is a fisherman. That is his business. So you look at this and say, okay, you got this big business, you got this big cash. That's gonna mean what? That's a big payday. Peter left all of that. He didn't think twice about it. Left all of that for Christ. Now, do we do that today? Do we leave our big plush bank account, our businesses and stuff, to go and serve God, to go and hear what he has to say? Do we not necessarily turning your back on your business or just turning it over, but changing your focus off of your business, your income, to God's business? Can you change your focus to be about God's business and the blessings that follow, that come? Because what you have, God can increase that 100-fold, 60-fold, 10-fold, just whatever. But that's what we see Peter doing here. And so the next verse here in verse 11, where it says that, and Simon Peter went up and dragged, he helped the disciples got up to the shore without the help of Peter, but he did help them bring the fish ashore. And it says he went up and dragged the net to the land full of large fish, 153. And although there were so many fish, the net did not break. So, number one, the commentators in here, they were saying, some says the number 153, that it represents the number of known nations at that time, that in the converts that will be in those nations, that come from those nations. Another one is just 100. That's just the number. That's just the number of fish that they caught. And then it's also saying that the net did not break. And so the commentator says that the fact that the net was not torn, it may symbolize that the capability of the gospel to catch and so many people without failing. So when you caught by that gospel, when the word of the gospel is into your heart and it catches you, you're in the palm of God's hand, and he is not going to let you go. Even though you step outside that line and start acting up sometimes, but he's still right there with you. He's still there with you. So don't ever think that God has forsaken you or left you, because he has not. You still have that word in your heart. And so moving on here to verses, verse 14. Where he's telling him, this is now the third time that Jesus showed himself to the disciples after the resurrection. That's the third time that they have seen him. And it's probably been about 32 days or more since they first encountered with him. And in verse 15 through 17, we see Jesus is restoring Peter, where, Jesus asked him 3 times, Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep, tend my sheep, feed my sheep is what he's saying. And then Peter responds, Lord, I love you. Yes, I love you. I love you, Lord. He's feeling a little down because he asked him 3 times. Well, doing a little word study there, the word love, agape, that's the word that Jesus used. And it's means to love, to profoundly love someone, to really be committed to that person. And the love that Peter used is kairos, which means fond of. He yeah, he loves him, kind of like in past. You love your friend, or you love watching a TV show or something like that. It does. Jesus' love is a much greater and deeper love. And when him saying this and asking him to feed, do you love me? Feed my sheep, because he is, do you love me? He's giving him a command, feed my sheep. Now, this is the same person that denied Christ 3 times. And 3 times, Jesus restores Peter. He is restoring him back to the rock, the keys to the kingdom. He's restoring him back to where he had elevated him to. And that's I guess that's what's standing out to me in these verses here, how he restores you. He forgives Peter. He has forgiven him and is restoring him. And a lesson that I have learned is, when someone has offended me, hurt me, or whatever, forgive them. Forgive them, move on, and carry on. If you forgive that person and that person acknowledge they did wrong, hurt you, or whatever, then you restore a relationship. But if that person is not acknowledging his wrong or her wrong, or doing something out of line with you, then you still forgive them, but you don't have to be their best friends. You just shake it off and you keep it moving. And then eventually they'll see they wrong, or come to you and, try to get with you. But, that's where you have to use your wisdom, your knowledge, and that's in God, because only God knows what's in that person's heart. We got some sly little devils around here. But moving on here, Jesus has restored him to where he had him as the rock, the rock of the church. And in verses 18 through 19, you see where he's talking about the martyrdom, well, the type of death that Peter will go to, and then he's, just telling them, this is what's going to happen to you. And I don't think Peter was ready to hear that. And that, he says, you'll walk where they walk, you girded yourself, and will walk where you wish. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and others will gird you and carry you where you do not wish to go. Now, that was verse 18. And that's just saying, when in his older age, he's gonna be in prison, be martyred. And that's what he did by Nero. He was martyred, crucified upside down by Nero. At his request, he was turned upside down. And then, of course, Peter's like, well, what about him? What about John? And he's looking over there at what it says, the other disciple. And Jesus was saying, well, if I will that he remain until I come. And so basically, and that's verse 22, where he said, if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? You follow me. And Jesus said, you stay in your lane. And that's what we all need to do. Stay in our lane. Don't look at what somebody else is doing. You focus on what God has you to do. Put before you. That's what we need to do. Learn to do that. We all will be a whole lot happier, instead of criticizing what somebody else said, what they did, he didn't preach this word right, he didn't preach that word right. He preached that word as God gave him that word. So, you stay in your lane, let other people stay in their lane, and we all be getting along just fine. And I think that is just a really profound statement of Christ, just to say that you worry about what I put before you to do. Don't worry about him. I got him. I'm doing this thing. As my mom used to say, he is still on the throne. He don't need your help. And then in verse 25 here, John says, and there are also many other things that Jesus did, which if they were written in one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be that it to be written in. So he's saying so many miracles and signs and wonders that Jesus did. It's just not enough books in the world to contain it. It's just so many things that he had done. And the disciples, the gospels actually, they don't write down single thing that Jesus did, but they wrote what the Holy Spirit had them to write. Well, that concludes my study of John. This is the entire book of John. That was my last one here. And I really and thoroughly enjoyed it. And it has just reminded me of the love that Jesus has for us, the length that he would go to save us, and things that he do, how much he loves us. So just think about, study this book, read this book, and if you haven't given your life to Christ, you should really think about doing so. But anyway, you be blessed. Go out and be a blessing, and have a blessed day. Bye. And I lost my thing.